I'm excited. I'm excited. At the same time, I'm elated. I'm nervous. At the same time, I see that I could feel butterflies in my stomach to introduce this eminent, experienced, and celebrated teacher in Kerala. That's what I could say. There is a question that rises in my mind whether I could do justice as a moderator to this session. I told you, she is a celebrated teacher in Kerala. She says, I quote, "Teaching is a ministry of my utmost happiness. Teaching is a ministry of utmost happiness," unquote. She is very committed. Rather, I would say that she is wedded to the profession. I don't exaggerate it. I don't exaggerate it. You would vouchsafe it after you listen to Madam's session. She shouldered her responsibilities, the academic responsibilities of her college. I mean it, my friends. 240 participants are here. She shouldered her responsibilities in a sense that academic responsibilities right from her undergraduation. She was navigating the NAC team during the 4th cycle. I told you that she is a celebrated teacher and wedded to her profession, a committed teacher. And such a way she shouldered her responsibility and made the institution at the top of the educational map of India, securing or obtaining A++ to her college with a coveted, commendable CGPA 3.57, which is the third highest in the country. All that credit goes to Madam. Now, please, there are 258 participants are here. There are many young aspiring participants are here. Please, this is a humble request to you all from the host side. Please open the website of St. Teresa College of Kochi. Go to the site of the English department. Open the profile of Madam. You would be jealous of such rich, enriching profile. Very enriching profile, I would rather say. I was very jealous. At the same time, it was very infectious. I was mesmerized. I was very inspired. That made me to speak like this. Now, she is the alumna of the same college. Very intellectual, very intellectual. She secured, in those days, she secured first class in the University of Kerala. She obtained her PhD in English language and literature in Mahatma Gandhi University. Friends, you listen here. She pursued her second master's in international English language teaching and applied language studies at London Metropolitan University, London. Now, she specialized in Indian writing English, linguistics and applied language studies, cultural studies, modern European drama, Dalit studies, critical theories which include modernism, postmodernism, body and cultural studies. I told you that she is a committed academician. Now I see that such a way she elevated the institution in having, she played the instrumental role in collaborating esteemed institutions. She played an instrumental role in collaborating her institution with London Metropolitan University, the American International University, the State Kansas University, Deakin University, University of Scotland. Why? What is the objective? For facilitating research initiative, tuning program, and value-added programs to her college. Really, the students are gifted. Friends, I listened to her twice. I wanted her to bring to our college. And I wanted to introduce to our faculty members And we are very fortunate enough to introduce her to the in the virtual platform where we have 500 plus audience here in the international level. When I was listening to her, I felt myself that I was listening to Wordsworth's The Solitary Reaper. See, I have the feeling and experience of Wordsworth listening to the young girl reaping and singing by herself in a solitary reaper. I remember the last two lines of Solitary Reaper. The music in my heart I bore long, after it was here no more. After it was here no more. Such a melodious, mellifluous voice she has. When I talked to her, I was not introduced to her, but the last minute, in the 11th hour, after discussing with Markson, and I asked his permission. He said, "You please fix it." And I asked her, immediately she accepted my invitation. Subbu, what do you want me to do? Then see here, I would like to discuss one more thing. Madam, please, you speak on a topic which is close to your heart, but she refused. She refused, literally she refused. She wanted to do it. She wanted to explore, which is not explored in any one of the conferences. I told you that she is a celebrated teacher. This is her 150th conference. This is her 150th conference. I think conference or webinar, which I don't have any clarity about it. 150th conference that she told me. And she told me that I was little skeptical about it. Madam, this last session, science fiction. Now, because people from literature will have an aversion towards science fiction. But she said, don't worry, I will make them listen to my speech. I'm going to speak not fiction, science fiction, not written by the Indian writers, written by writers across the world. And I would rather say that you are going to listen, though it is a science fiction, you are going to listen the singing of Nightingale from Kerala. Such a reverence, love, the respect that I have for Madam. I'm extremely happy. The committee, the webinar committee, the Mannar College is extremely happy to have your August presence, Madam, and extremely happy to introduce such an eminent, celebrated teacher in Kerala to this August gathering. Thank you so much, Madam. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you so much for, I just don't know, I'm overwhelmed by the love and affection that is placed on me by Dr. Ram Subbu. I don't know whether I am worthy of all that he has said, but my only prayer is today, let me touch your hearts with whatever little experience that I have had in the 30 years of my academic practice. Are we beginning the session, or is there someone else who would be speaking at the moment?
No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Our Honorable Secretary Sir is very much available. He is listening to your talk.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Elango. And I take this opportunity to thank Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Vaidehi Vijayakumar, Sri M. Vijayaraghavan, and Professor Armstrong, hello, thank you so much, sir, and Dr. P. Jayapriya from Mother Teresa Women's University, and of course, Dr. A. Ram Subaya and Dr. R. Dayala Krishnan, who is the President of Society for Literature and Culture. Thank you, everyone, and also the admin, who's been very patient to tolerate my inadequacies as far as the technical aspects are concerned. I hope I'm audible to all of you, all the 300 and odd participants who are trusting me with their mind and with their, I should say, it is listening. Unfolding yourself is itself a soul-searing, soul-touching process. So today's topic, there were so many apprehensions about science fiction. And I think, can you see the presentation now?
Yes, ma'am. No. You have to share it, madam.
Yeah?
You have to
Can
share it. You wish to share the screen, madam?
Yes.
Please share.
Can you see the presentation?
Admin, are you there?
Yes, Professor. Ma'am, you
Yes,
can
please.
press the yes, Professor. Ma'am, you can just press the share screen button down.
Okay.
Green
Is
button.
that okay now?
No, not yet. Can you press the share screen button down in the Zoom window?
It's in green color, madam.
1 second, I think. Let me start it once again. I don't want to keep the audience waiting. So it is like, let me maximize the screen so that, I think this will be better. Can you,
Ma'am, we need to open the Zoom window. In the Zoom window, you have to press the share screen button down, green button down.
okay.
You are able to see the green button there, ma'am? Share screen button.
Honestly, I think
In the Zoom window, ma'am. In the Zoom window where we
let
see
me,
the.
yeah. 1
Yes.
second.
Thank you.
Can you see then? Is it?
It's not yet shared, ma'am.
No.
What's happened?
No, right below your frame, the Zoom window. Right below the Zoom window, you find the share screen, green color.
1 second. You are visible, but I think the rest is.
No issue, ma'am. Just in the Zoom window, down, can you see mute or start video? Those buttons, can you see down? Down, what you are seeing?
Down, see, the problem is I am switched on to another screen. It was very comfortable. I cannot see myself as well, you know.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Down, what?
Yes. Let me, yes. 1 second. Let me share. Yes. Okay. 1 second.
Yes, ma'am. We are ready.
Yeah.
Admin, you help her. She has to open the file, I think.
No. I can.
Yes. Yes, ma'am. The file is ready. We need to be in the slideshow. Again, from 63, we need to come to the left side.
Yes.
Yes. That's it.
Yes. Is it seen now?
Yes, ma'am. Very much.
Yes, ma'am. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Sorry
Perfect.
about that glitch that happened. Actually, today my technical person is not there. Usually she's the one who handles everything. And I apologize for the waiting that you were made to. Now, regarding science fiction, this particular picture is very special to me because this is the Orion Hills you can see and the large space of State Kansas University in US. It's closer to Ohio. It is a State Kansas University that you can, and there is a Gunn Center for Science Fiction where I did a course. I was trained to teach science fiction as well as to specialize in creative writing. So this is a very special place where you can also go and attend the course. And the center is very special because of the grand master of science fiction, the only person who is a contemporary of H.G. Wells, the man who invented our tomorrows. That is why I titled my talk as Science Fiction is, of course, a life seeker telescope. And these are the people, these are the writers. I don't know why they are marginalized. These are the writers who have invented our tomorrows. And there is James E. Gunn. I will show you his picture, the grand master of science fiction. And I was blessed actually to visit him as a special guest. And I was there with him for 1.5 months. Actually, he was the one who changed my perception about writing, my perception about science fiction. Usually, as Subbu sir said, when you look into, when you glimpse into its history and the men who made our tomorrows, James E. Gunn's contribution to making science fiction a part of the grand narrative or the main literature is something that has to be acknowledged. And that is why I brought in his picture, because this is a tribute to the Grand Master himself. And he's also a professor in English. The long years, I think it's almost 70 years he's been writing, he's been teaching. He's 95 now. It's been 3-4 years since I have visited. I was planning to go this year. Unfortunately, I couldn't go because of the pandemic, but Gunn is Jim for me. Jim is fine. He's just waiting so that I could go next year, perhaps. So when we talk about science fiction, I wouldn't digress. When we talk about science fiction, this is the man in the library. Is releasing his 92nd book, Transcendental. So we'll come to that later. Now, when we talk about science fiction, we need to establish what we are talking about. There should be a clarity in your mind as to what we are talking, because it has many definitions. And for laymen and those who are, or some of you who are not familiar, I have seen the reluctance in many scholars of mine to go and undertake or explore, why can't we research about science fiction? I should tell you, my dear, that any genre, it is so open. You can use any theoretical framework into its mainframe. You can situate this literature into any of the theories that you want to, because when you speak about Agamben, the Homo Sacer theory that is becoming very, very popular, posthumanism, you can look at transactionality, you can speak about gender politics, you can speak about subaltern, you can speak about any of the mainstream theories, trauma, or environmental theories, that is eco-criticism. Anything can be situated in the mainframe of this literature, and science fiction has many definitions. It is called as a fictional exploration of the unknown. Maybe what is the term science? Some of you might be science teachers. I still remember that when I was during this course, very difficult course, they will send you the list of books that you need to really read and explore, and they will ask you to dissect it or dissect it in a proper manner. It will be an open conversation. There are no formalities. You sit together. There were scientists from NASA who were with me to attend this 3 weeks course. So what I'm saying is, this is what we surfaced with. How will you look at science? And they said science is nothing but knowledge. And that is exactly what you find in our Vedas also. Vedas also say that it means with, to know, knowledge. So when you look at the theories of knowledge, you can place it in the mainframe of science fiction. So there is an open-endedness of this literature. I do not understand why this gets marginalized. I think I feel that it is the new generation of scholars. When you're looking at other literature, subaltern and other post-colonialism and other literature, please turn your attention towards this vast area that remains untouched. So science literally means knowledge, and it also means nature of exploration. So maybe it is a fictional exploration into the ways of knowing. And also science strategy, as you know, 2 + 2 = 4. And when you look into the tiers, that is how the literature and science differentiates itself. I wouldn't say that they are binaries, but there is an erasure that has already taken place, which is destabilizing all kinds of distinctions that are there between knowledge systems. That is why our age calls for interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary knowledge, and how relevant it is to accommodate different forms of knowledge into our mainstream of learning. So it is rational investigation. Then you have seen the development of theories and development of theory. What do you mean by a theory? When you look into the definition of a theory, you would understand, there is no real definition of a theory. A theory is an experiential way of knowing things, and theory has to be validated. It has to stand the test of time. Otherwise, it will not be acknowledged as a theory. So that is why I have put it is supported by reproducible results. And when you look into traditional fiction, it is called literature of continuity. You might be familiar with this because it deals with people you know in the world. When you read about the agony that is felt by what should I say? That is, in many of those characters, for example, Romeo and Juliet, if you take the agony experienced by Romeo and Juliet, and then they sacrifice their lives at the altar of love, there is a divinity. And this is replicated over years, this theme. Or when you look at Lear, ripeness is all that is being said. The universe, as if the universe is conspiring against the human beings, as if, you look at the helpless situations in which we are placed. And there is a lot of literature that comes from connected with pandemic, and movies that are connected with pandemic. I'm not going to touch that. That is an entire area that is being very much discussed nowadays by academicians all the time. But I'm not going to deal with that. But we say that literature of continuity. Why we call it literature of continuity? Because it deals with people we know in the world and operating with rules we understand. Sometimes they break these rules, and also about characters, how they learn the rules and how they live with them. See, look at the situation. Now we have to wear the mask, we have to sanitize our hands. And do we sanitize our values? Do we sanitize our lives? That is a big question that is posed to you. What happens to your soul? What happens to your karma at the end of the day? So this is exactly what literature is all about. And SF, or science fiction for short, is a literature of change. It is, I have borrowed these lines from my grandmaster, James E. Gunn, whom I lovingly address as Jim. He's a solid presence in my life. And he says that this is a literature of discontinuity. Why literature of discontinuity? Because change is endemic. Not pandemic, change is endemic. And that is why science fiction, it is so prophetic. You can take any of those. I have added some videos so that if you get bored with my lecture, we can just take a break and look at the pandemic. Look at those videos, which are very, very, I have given it to Subusa, so he can, if there is lack of time, you can watch it in your own space. So this Fantasy also I'm not touching, because that itself is a huge, you know, that the rules have been altered arbitrarily. You have Alice in Wonderland, then you have Dracula. Look at Bram Stoker. I'm sure that you have read about Bram Stoker's connection with the pandemic. You know, there was this flu that broke out in Spain, and there were these you know, he listened, he was a very sick child, and then he was ill, and on the bed, while lying on his bed, his mother used to tell him stories about people who are buried walking out of the graves. Actually, it was because of the kind of terror that that this fever had created. People were buried alive at that point of time, but they were not dead, so they used to creep out of these graves in darkness, and there was this you know, this kind of bleeding that occurred in their stomach, which contributed to the blood coming out of their mouth, that led to the people thinking that they were dead people coming and drinking blood. So these are the things that happened. But the queen of that time, I don't remember her name, she actually put an edict by a consultant, a physician. She said nothing, no superstition need to be followed. But these tales had crossed over, spread all over Europe, and it came to England, it came to all parts of the world. And that contributed to the creation of Dracula, or the Draconian tales. So there was a scientific thing that was embedded here. So, and you enter into this world with a willing suspension of disbelief, which is from Coleridge. And SF asks the reader to assume that the world has changed. So maybe something unusual, but it is a natural event. How much you can, you know, you can accept things to the extent of granting the writer a plausible attention. So some of the people, some of the participants have already questioned me about fantasy. What is the difference between fantasy and science fiction? Fantasy is a literature of difference. I conclude with that statement because I can't go, because a lack of time, I cannot go detailed into that particular genre, but I will juxtapose fantasy and science fiction, and would definitely argue that science fiction is a literature of change, and fantasy has always been a part of human life. I mean, we love to fantasize, isn't it? That is a kind of a self-defense mechanism, perhaps. We love to travel into this world. And science fiction, when you look at science fiction, SF started, that is not there in the presentation. I'm telling you, science fiction started, what we look at science fiction, it might have started as American export as Coca-Cola, you know, like we think that it came from America. What actually it started in Europe, but that is what I told Subbu that I'm going to, maybe some of you might already know about it. Pardon me if you know, but I would just say that it was there in Europe. First and sharpest recognition of the way the technological change was shaping the lives of human beings. It was a reaction. Any literature you take, that is a reaction to the change. That is why I continue to argue that science fiction is a literature of change. And then this becomes and it showed the world that it is our responsibility to understand universe and our place in it. I stress upon the word understand. That is, one must discover the ways in which the universe work and develop theories why it works so. You know, and Einstein's theory, you know, E is equal to mc square. It is the theory of relativity. And there is a beautiful letter that he has kept for his daughter to open. He said, don't open it now, but yes. So you can Google about Einstein's letter and the beautiful message that he has left for us. Please, that I'm going to keep it as a suspense. So finally, what is it that we become? We become a minuscule, but the power to understand gives them the power to go anywhere and to do anything. how change affects the human beings and the universe. So those speculations about literature turned into stories, as I said, draconian stories, the stories that Bram Stoker created in Dracula. Even now at 12 o'clock, if you open the book and read, you will find something that is happening to you. So what I'm saying is, these speculations about change, you have to read it at 12 o'clock. Sir is laughing, but I'm telling you the truth. Midnight, just have a small light and then start reading. You will find tremors even now. And there are plenty of, there, and I should tell you, there are other platforms that have been developed in podcast about literature. We cannot marginalize that. It is called, that platform is called Fuck Boys of Literature. F-U-C-K, which was a dreaded word in a elite language. But now look at how creatively they have invented this platform, which is called Fuck Boys of Literature. F-U-C-K has not become a word. It is commonly used now. So that is what I'm saying. You cannot... you are always exposed to change. And this is why we say that it is a literature of change. And all of you know, I'm just briefly touching upon American and English. And I should tell you that Frankenstein is known as what happened in English literature, but actually she wrote it in, she was recuperating in Switzerland, and it was published in England. Published in 1818. And W. Aldous considers this as the first novel in SF. And you know that there are many others who followed. Edgar Allan Poe, Tell a Tale to the Heart. That's a beautiful story. And Nathaniel Hawthorne, you know about the, even now it is there. He's very much there in our syllabi. And they were the novelists who were trying to cope with this change. And I should tell you, the Irish immigrant, Fitzjames O'Brien, also published between 1830 and 1822. And then there was this German novelist, E.T.A. Hoffmann, who was already writing about animal magnetism. It is not something new. It was there, just imagine, it was there in 1832, about contemporary science and automatons. I don't know how many of you are familiar with that word. No time to go. You can speak for half an hour about this automaton, the very word. But time is our worst enemy. I don't want to bore you. So let us take, such as the Jules Verne, Jules Verne, who's very much a person who was in France. And there emerged a new kind of fiction, Voyage Extraordinaire. And H.G. Wells, of course, who is known as the man who invented our tomorrows. And in Germany, there was Kurt Laßwitz, who published 3 novels. Out of that, his extraordinary novel is about 2 planets. See, so there was a lot of discussion about our planets, about pre-human days, and Sam Lundwall of Sweden has pointed out, authors of lesser note, they were not known, but they were also writing about these fantastic, interventions and fantastic travel during this period. And I should tell you, I will come to John Campbell. That is what I wanted to tell you. State Kansas University organizes World Campbell Conference, which I was fortunate enough to attend. That happens in June. This year they cancelled, but if they are very happy to receive Indian scholars. It's not very expensive, but you can always apply and take a fellowship and go to State Kansas University. It will be a very rich experience. So let us look at why is it, I was wondering, we have never heard about John W. Campbell, who actually contributed, who was responsible for making science fiction very popular in America. And there were stories, I have a copy of these. I brought them from America. They're small magazines. Actually, these magazines were responsible for creating many world-class writers in science fiction. So they were called amazing stories, astounding stories of super science. And this amazing stories was edited by Hugo Gernsback, you know, and then John W. Campbell took over as an editor, and he introduced the term analog. And when you look at the history, I think this is something that you need to know. US, it picked up an extraordinary voyage. Science fiction took up an extraordinary voyage, and scientific romance and scientific romance was also added into the into these magazines. But in Europe, these kind of stories happened in isolation. We should be asking the question, why? Isn't it? Without synergistic combination of reader interest and commercial possibility. Whereas in America, it became a big industry. But in US, it was, I should tell you again, the middle class. So I'm saying that there is a lot of power, you know, there is so many things related to theory that you can look at when you look into science fiction. It opens a lot of stratagems for young scholars and reader or lovers of literature. So I'm saying in US, it was a desire of the newly educated working class for an involving but undemanding reading experience and the opportunity to make money from publishing adventure stories of various kinds that led to the popularizing of these pulp magazines. You know about, you know, the pulp literature that is becoming very famous in India. You can always connect it with that. And the reasons for the absence of literature, science fiction in Europe is mainly because of the mayhem that was created by the World War. And as you know, the First World War, US emerged as a world power. And after the second, Gunn always says, after the Second World, it became a superpower, which actually he said that should not have happened, and remained relatively sheltered from the after effects of the Great Depression, while Europe was dismantled completely. And that was one of the reasons why these science fiction did not become very popular in Europe. And when you look into the political aspect of history, which you are all familiar, there is the communist revolution in Russia. Mussolini was becoming very powerful in 1923. Then, of course, our Hitler, the Nazi movement, also created a lot of political chaos. And then the last nail was the invasion of Italy, how Ethiopia was invaded by Italy, which actually shattered into pieces League of Nations. It crumbled under that weight. So SF always concerns itself with matters whose importance is greater than individual or community. That is one thing that you need to understand. And the golden age of SF is, of course, which starts with Isaac Asimov. Isaac Asimov, I should say that I had a very beautiful experience, that is in the library of the State Kansas University. State Kansas University, they have preserved all the letters of these grandmasters like H.G. Wells. I had held those. You are not allowed to carry the pen inside the library. You need to carry only the pencils will be kept in the library. So all these letters have been filed and kept. And I was able to see the typewritten letters of H.G. Wells, the typewritten letters of Isaac Asimov, Theodore Sturgeon, all these. And I think I have some copies. They do not allow you to take, but one letter they said gave me as to acknowledge my passion for literature, acknowledge my, so if I get a copy, I think it is in my mail, I would forward it to you. So another thing that, so I'm not going to, I would say that the problem with the definition of SF is that genre, you have a story of the elephant in Hindu mythology. That is, the genre is like the elephant surrounded by blind men, a different creature. It evolves as a different creature or appears as a different creature, depending on which the blind men touch. So SF can incorporate many genres in something that is irreducibly SF. What is left is a situation that has been radically changed by natural events, natural as opposed to supernatural. So the word natural includes human intervention and discovery, or even alien intervention and discovery, but it's connected to science and technology. So literature of change means an attitude towards your experience. That is what it means. And the great book that touched our human experience is Darwin's Origin of Species. You have to read that book. You should see the sketches that he has made. Amazing. You know, you should see the beautiful, it is available on the net. Please go through the book. Even if you are not interested in reading, look at the sketches that he has made. And with that comes the most important theory in our midst. That is the theory of naturalism. I know you know about naturalism, which applied the principle of scientific determination to fiction. So this is how it is interconnected. This is how, you know, so the literary qualities change. SF changes the literary quality, the sophisticated narrator. It criticizes, it gives importance to satire. It is a social response to change. It can be called anti-science because it looks at the anemia that is there in science. I'm using that term anemia. That is the emotional anemia that is there in science. So you know about naturalism. I'm not going naturalism. Those who are curious to know about naturalism, I would say Emily Zola, Frank Norris, who is definitely an American, Jack London, which is not very known, Upton Sinclair Theodore. They treated their characters as the products of revolution, a social revolution. So naturalism treats human beings as a product of their environment rather than of their characters or decisions. And SF treats human beings as a species that has evolved as a result of environment, as a species on which the evolutionary process is still at work. So now let us understand that humanity possesses the intellectual ability to recognize its origin and the processes at work on it. And change is possible when you encounter the intractability of conditioning. Now I request that the intractability of conditioning. I'd request Dr. Subbu, would you please play the first video of Interstellar?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
And then we will go to the next part.
Yes, ma'am. But
please say
yes,
that it is going and yeah.
Yes, ma'am, but I just want to tell you that as soon as I share that, this screen will get closed.
No problem.
So you need to again share the screen from the start, like.
Yeah, no problem. No problem, sir.
So, sir, in the meantime, we can tell, sir, only this Interstellar is there.
Okay. Only the Interstellar is there?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't know. There is, yes. I have, could you, sir, please send the other one also?
No, we have only one video in the entire file, madam.
I had
Please,
sent.
please ask the concern.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Shall I play it, ma'am?
Yes. Oh, I have to.
No, I have to play. I have to play. Shall I play?
Okay. Yes. But I think there is a problem with the audio.
Audio.
Play baseball. Popcorn at a ball game is unnatural. I want a hot dog. School says you're going to follow my footsteps. That's great. You think that's great?
He said that there is only one.
It's okay, huh? All that matters how you feel about it. I like what you do.
There are 3 videos in the same.
Great at it.
Ma'am, it's not here. Madam, it is, you are muted.
Let's get out here. All right, Snoozy. Okay, let's mask up.
Ma'am, even that. Please ask him to send it again, please.
Yeah, of course. ഒന്നുകൂടെ അയക്കുവോ? അയച്ചു കൊടുത്താൽ മതി. സാറിന് അയച്ചു സാറിന് അയച്ചു കൊടുത്താൽ മതി. താങ്ക് യു.
Set your windows.
I think you can pause the video.
Yes, ma'am.
I think we'll continue with the lecture now.
Yes, ma'am. You can share the screen from your side now.
Yes. Sure. Thank you. So is it now? So did you? I hope all of you saw the kind of dust. I'm sure that you know which movie this is. And then look at the kind of, we never think about one thing, that is, this is what I said, you know, now we are also wearing the mask. We are also not, we are also under surveillance. We are also paused. We also face the difficulty of sustenance or survival. I was searching for that word, survival. You can see the dust, but this is here, we are threatened by a virus. So what I'm saying is, change is possible only when you encounter the intractability of conditioning. I just wanted to give you a feel, you know, and in Interstellar especially, the message is that the planet cannot be saved. So we are looking at the possibility of going to another planet, and this is exactly what is suggested. You know, how can you survive in some other place? So that is what I'm saying. We have exploited nature, see, and there is a kind of message that is strongly coming to you through science fiction. And what is that message? I'm not going to be didactic today, but I would love you to search for the answers in science fiction. Now, coming back to the whole narrative, I would say that you cannot but mention Asimov, you know, sorry. I'm skipping, you know, Asimov. That is, Asimov actually, in his Caves of Steel, even now when you look at the theme, he had introduced, there is a short story called Last Question. You can Google, there is a graphic novel also there, and there is a beautiful word that he has encrypted for you. The universe is wasting its energy. You know, you can look, I'm avoiding cyberpunk, that I'm avoiding purposefully because we do not have time. But Asimov also has, just imagine at that point of time, he has envisaged a world of space shuttles, planetary probe, maybe nuclear power, robotics, computers, all the high-tech world that is possible now. And when he has introduced a term, agoraphobia, I hope you know the term agoraphobia. It is the fear of open spaces. And this particular novel is opens with the whole space is rocked by this particular domain of where he's the caves of steel. You know, that place is rocked by a murder mystery, which drives the action forward, and how one person called Lige Bailey is able to think the unthinkable. My point is that he is able to think the unthinkable. And in Interstellar also, if you see the slides, the girl and the father shares the bookshelf, as you saw, is a very important thing in Interstellar. And one thing that they demolish is the linearity of time. I don't know how many of you have analyzed the movie. It is the linearity of time that is exploded. Time is cyclic. So there are many possibilities that you can use to analyze science fiction. So, and then Asimov wove them into foundation stories and involved the plan of spaces. We could never imagine. Now we can imagine the time of space, you know, imagine the spacecraft. So he put forward to the human beings the concept of spaces, and to push the short-lived, disease-ridden, agoraphobic people. And the most important aspect of the existence is a search for humanity's origin, its purpose, and ultimate fate. And that is exactly what is explored in Vedas. Vedas is not written. It is transferred. Someone, Purusha-kritam. It is said Purusha-kritam. There is no gender. Sorry, we are so obsessed with gender now. Gender is a social construct, or it is a construct, but we are not speaking about gender. Purusha-kritam in Sanskrit does not mean that it is male dominated. Purusha-kritam, somebody, it is passed on, you know. So there is neuromancer. I mean, there is a whole lot of world that opens when you study Vedas. You know, it is impossible task. But when you attune yourself to Veda Parijayam, Vedam, you know, what is this knowledge which is already, and there is a kind of a war that we are going to see about new knowledge. We speak about new normalcy, but we are going to witness knowledge wars. So there are other writers, Neuromancer, which is a cyberpunk, and William Gibson, you know, who were Romanian writers. And also Bruce Franklin's Future Perfect, which was published in 1991. These, because I saw some requests about books and authors, so I am repeating them for you. And then Stanislaw Lemin from Poland. Stanislaw Lemin from Poland. And Gabriel Garcia Marquez, which you think is very much literature person, but he's also written a lot of science fiction stories. You don't think that it should have science. When you speak about Margaret Atwood and Hans Maytel, there is no science. It is a science meaning knowledge, you know. So there is a lot of subversions that you have to do in your mind when you speak about science fiction. And then I'm coming to, and science fiction is found in many parts of the world which are not represented properly. And there is a 6-volume anthology that is written. And this is a greatest contribution. I'm showing you the book. I didn't get time to take a picture and attach it. This is a book. I bought only 2 volumes because it was too heavy. This was a gift from, and he has captured everything that he has lived for in 6 volumes. Science fiction, the road to science fiction. So I thought I would do it as a tribute to my master, James E. Gunn. So, and in this, he has captured many voices which are not represented. And in France, of course, Jules Verne, which is authentic, identifiable, I should say, intellectual. And then you can also see this particular title, The Journey to the Center of the Earth. And he had many predecessors also, Rabelais, who wrote about Gargantua and Pantagruel, which was published in 1532 and 1564. And then comes Cyrano de Bergerac, A Voyage to the Moon. That was published in 1659, just imagine. And Voltaire, Rousseau, we speak about them as philosophers, but Voltaire had also penned one book in 1750, which is titled Micromegas, you know. And then there was Louis Sebastian Mercier, Memories of the Year 2500, just imagine. It was published in 1771. And Giacomo di Casanova di Sengal, Isocameron. I have not read that particular book, but of course Voltaire's book is readable. I don't know whether the copy is available, but I had a stint with that when I went to State Kansas University. So one had illustrious contemporaries, and then I wanted to make something which I think you might not know. There was this astronomer. India is known for its astrology. Similarly, in France, there was a lot of interest in astronomy. And Flammarion, this might be a name that you are not familiar with. Flammarion, who was an astronomer, 1842 to 1925, who wrote non-fiction and fiction. And this funny title, Laughing Do More, which was published in 1893. And I'm going to speak about not Flammarion, but I'm going to speak to you about Robida. Robida, who is known even now for his futuristic illustrations. You should understand that Galileo is connected with Milton's Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained. I never intended to speak today about this, but you should understand the telescope. You know, when you read the 24 volumes of Paradise Lost and Paradise Regained, you look at the kind of images that are flooded with about Satan and the opening lines of man's first disobedience and the fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world and all our yesterdays, till one man restored it to the world, to us. So you look at, and there was a man who could do all the 24 volumes using, you know, verbatim. Can you guess who that is? Lord Macaulay. No time for an interactive space, because I think that I should do justice to Dr. Subbu's expectations. So I'm packing information for this session. So this is exactly the connection between literature and science. And you should understand Milton composed it when he was losing his eyesight. But he's known as, I've been in Cambridge. It has been my alma mater. There is a beautiful picture of Milton in Cambridge University. He's known as a lady of, that is common knowledge. He looks so beautiful, feminine. Maybe there is femininity in men as well, and masculinity in female. It is the Shakti, you know, the in Sanskrit, there is how the word and the sound is connected. Vagartha viva sampriktau, Vagartha pradipatte jagadapindarau vande Parvati Parameshwaraha. Just as the word and the sound are fused together with an energy. Similar is the energy that is that happens in the joining of Shiva and Parvati. It is just as much, there is so much of synergy in that word. So coming back to France, you should know that there were you know, Paul Claudel, all these, there are translated works available, Sola Anthole, France, and then Raymond Roussel, and then there is a person who is I think you would be able to identify. I request the admin to just if that video is available, please show that. It is the second one, if there is time, or otherwise you can have a look at it. It is the Phantom of the, Phantom of the Opera, which Phantom of the Opera, which was a science fiction novel that was written by Gaston Leroux. The movie is very famous, but the author remains not so famous. So you can see this was published. Just imagine the year in which, and he has also authored 2 novels about Martians, not only H.G. Wells, in 1909. So, and Massac was the first publishing house in France. And it was a very interesting thing to know that there was this story that was actually written by 5 weeks in a balloon. Just imagine, all this was happening in a time when we never even thought about it. So I'm coming back to Robideau. I would show you some illustrations. I'm not going to speak about H.G. Wells because it is very much familiar. So I'm not going to speak about that. I'll come back to this crazy ideas, but look at this caricature. So this is, Subhasad, please don't worry about the video. You can watch it later. But this is look at the caricature. Look at the caricature. This is why Albert Robida. Let me ask the audience, someone can unmute and tell me, do you know about this? Have you seen this picture? At least a few people. Please do. I really find it difficult to talk when you remain invisible and I remain
Admin, please enable the chat box. Admin.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
At least 1 or 2 people, please respond to me.
Yes, sir. Anita ma'am.
Otherwise, you please ask them to raise their hands and you can.
Have you seen this illustration? Just one answer is enough.
Yes, ma'am. Anita ma'am has said it is yes.
Yes. Have you seen? Let me check the chat box.
Please open the chat box.
Yes, the chat box is open now.
Oh.
London Bridge. Dr. V.L. Isaac said, yes, ma'am. Rohini has said London Bridge.
So this is, actually, this is not London Bridge.
Ma'am, Anita ma'am can speak now. Sorry for the interruption. Anita ma'am, can you speak?
Yes. Have you seen this? This is actually mistaken for London. It is not London Bridge. It is something that has been sketched by this Albert Robida, who lived during 1848 and 1926, who's futuristic. This is a futuristic illustration by him. And even now in the art world, this remains unparalleled. Anita, would you like to make a comment here?
Anita madam, please unmute your mic and you speak.
Ma'am. Yes, sir. Anita ma'am is unmuted, but she's not speaking. Ma'am, can you hear us? Anita ma'am? Yes, she's replying to me. Okay. Can you speak, ma'am? You can speak.
You can read it out. You can read it out. I'm absolutely no problem. No problem. The admin can read out so that I can hear the message.
Anita ma'am can speak now. She has written only yes. Only yes. Or Dr. S. Devika.
Someone is willing, please ask you raise your hand and we'll give you the option to speak and to
I
converse
think
with the speaker.
Yes, sir.
Or we will keep it for the end. Let it continue and then.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Otherwise, yes. This maybe we will. I thought it was if it would have been a.
Supriya ma'am, can you unmute and speak? Madam Supriya ma'am. Or no, I'm not able to find the name. It says Galaxy Tab A they have raised the hand.
Okay, leave it.
Yeah.
So that is okay.
Okay, sir.
So if they have seen that I'm so happy, so this is about, it is all about the sketches. I will show you three more sketches by this fantastic, there's one more. These are all done by Robida, R-O-B-I-D-A, Robida, and he has written one book which is called 5 Weeks in a Balloon. And, as a parody to Yul Verne, he also wrote about voyage.
Sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, Anita ma'am has typed in. This is like W.B. Yeats gives an idea in his poem, Second Coming About the Future. This is like W.B. Yeats gives an idea in his poem,
The
Second Coming About the Future.
Okay, things fall apart. Yes, definitely. But I would say that my idea is, like you need to look in the way in which, they illustrated things that could be envisaged at that time. They never thought that it could be realized at that point of time. That was a point that I wanted to, and he was, and then you can also think about Yul Verne, who wrote about 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, 1870, and he was motivated by the ideas of Henry Saint-Simon, who remains hidden, whose slogan was, "The whole world belonged to mankind." The essence of all these writers, what they wanted to, you have so many space movies, you have so many new gen movies that are coming to us. Look at these illustrations as well. So you can see that they just convey the message that the Industrial Revolution, they thought only about that. It was a time of Industrial Revolution, and they thought, or they believed that the Industrial Revolution will unite mankind in a universal association for the exploration of nature, instead of being divided for the exploitation of nature or man. And he was one of the greatest literary genius of his time. You should know he drew it with charcoal, his pencil drawings, pencil sketches, which is even now surviving. And Pope Louis XIII actually commended him by saying that he had such a purity in his writings, and he was inducted to French Legion of Honor. So he was an illustrator, etcher, lithographer, caricaturist, and an early science fiction author who was very much a contemporary of Yul Verne. I'm not going to go in detail. You can definitely research about him. And one thing that I wanted to tell you was, he's the father of this internet. In one of those books, he has actually, he had imagined the world which was connected astonishingly well with a prophetic, device called telephonoscope. He's known as a father of Skype. He's known as a father of internet. He has envisaged that, and he has spoken about that. Not in the, I'm not saying that he has invented the internet, but he thought about it in science fiction. So, and he had written about how it transmits live performances and news broadcasts, distance, like how you can connect yourself through the distance and through Skype. Like that is a word that would be familiar to you. And he's best known for his trilogy, that is the 20th century. That is what it is titled, 1883, which was published in 1883. And he also has sketched for the books that were written by Flammarion, which I spoke about. So this there are many books like this which are which remain unknown to the world of literature. And I should tell you, there was this book. This is very important book in that is the 20th century. It is a very important book, and that was serialized in 50 parts at that point of time. I think I would cut short. And there is another writer in France who is known as Rossini Ein, you know, Rossini Ein, who had written a book which is called The Giant Cat, which was the only book that was translated into English at that point of time. Why I'm introducing him? You might be wondering, is this woman mad to introduce him? He was very much important in the sense he actually gave the world an interest to turn or to research about prehistoric men, prehistoric fiction. And that became a fashionable turn at the end of this century. And he was also connected with Fisher's trilogy. T.S. Eliot, you can connect it with Fisher, Wasteland, and which the book that was written was The Testament of Man. And that also was connected with William Golding, who Nobel Prize winner William Golding, which also took up very kind of an extraordinary interest in humanity, in the development of humanity, and his book, The Inheritors. So this is how literature remains connected. And Boris Vian represent the turning point in science fiction in France. He was a rebel, and he was actually, you cannot but mention about Boris Vian. So you have French Rossini Ein on one side. Then we come to Boris Vian, who represents the turning point in science fiction. And you should understand that he was a man. I'm concluding the session with one more point, and that was he gave the world the word pataphysics. You can Google pataphysics, which studies exceptions rather than laws, and then aspires to provide imaginary solutions to real problems. And that is what the pandemic is doing now. You know, that is exactly what the pandemic is doing now, imaginary solutions to real problems. And this was turned into a reality by writers like Ionesco and Brecht. So coming back to this word, Boris Vian, and the term pataphysics. So, and he was a pataphysician because he was good at contriving words, playfully creating rhymes. You should understand that he wrote about 400 songs, 42 novels, 4 poetry collections, and 6 opera libretti. And he lived only up to the age of 39 years. And now coming back to the author which you know in Germany, you know, and that is our Kafka. I don't know how many of you know that Kafkian stories, or Kafka was the one who was known for his science fiction stories. And it is this beautiful story, Hunter Grachus. Hunter Grachus is, you can Google, there is a lot of, now I think if you Google, there is a lot of material about the story. I think when you look at Kafka, you know that his life was full of tragedy because he was controlled by his father, and his tragic vision of life is which is presented with the vividness of very disturbing images that you can see in Kafkian writings. And the story, the parable of Hunter Grachus, is about a man who is not allowed to die. I'm not going to elaborate because I don't want to keep you for more than 1 hour. Our time is coming to an end. So this Hunter Grachus problematizes the helplessness of not being able to die. And you can see the beautiful language. One thing that you should understand with Kafka is that it is profoundly disturbing, but themes are profoundly disturbing, but the style is luminous, lucid, and serene in assuming a terrible reality. And that is exactly what Hunter Grachis tells you about. And there is a boatman in Grachis, and that is synonymous with the church. I don't want you to enslave you. I don't want to enslave you with my ideas, but I feel that this person, that is the boatman that you see, is synonymous with the church. There are many dimensions of power struggle that you can see. And the dows that you see lighting on the harbor, they represent the 3 dows. I remember 3 dows represent the Trinity, the Trinity, and this, maybe the divine, the divine. So this is, of course, there are multi the layers of meaning that is embedded in this story. So Kafka's presence, and I would tell you a story to take so that you will not get bored. Kafka was so much persecuted, so much, he had to suffer so much because of his a father who scorned his passion for literature. So there was a friend for him. I hope you know about this friend, Max Brod. He gave all his writings, all his, whatever he has penned down, and he asked him to burn them. And Max Brod had warned that he would not be able to do it. He said, I wouldn't do it. If Brod had been malleable to Kafka's wishes, and if he had remained unconvinced of the genius that Kafka was, his messages would have been lost to the world in an unfeeling, inscrutable, and bureaucratic universe. See, that is what he's speaking about. That is what we are facing now. That seems so appropriate now with each passing decade. And this is one of the most important messages that is conveyed through science fiction, to us, that we are all victims of change. And the 14 phases of science fiction I have summed up. I'll send this presentation to Dr. Subbu. Far traveling, wonders of science, man and mission, man and future, man and society, man and environment, and progress, of course, and war. And of course, there are cataclysms, superpowers, Superman, and so on. And in India, I end with a beautiful story that you can, even India was not kind of actually, so much was there from 1500 BC, there were writers. And there was Jagadish Chandra Bose, Jagadish Chandra Bose, who was writing about science fiction. His, and then Marathi experience, there was Lakshman Londe, who has written about the second Einstein. It is a beautiful story on which I conclude. The multilingual languages, the multilingual environment, according to Gunn, is very fertile for science fiction. I think there might be many people who will be aspiring to become science fiction writers. I conclude with this story, please. I think this is available. Lakshman Londe's The Second Einstein, and there is the story of Srinivas, who decodes Einstein's, where Einstein ended, but he's suffering from a disease, cancer, so he will die. So what this Chittale, that physician, he preserves the brain of Dr. Srinivas. Dr. Srinivas is very reluctant to agree to this, but they do it. So he completes his research. So the brain is preserved, the body is burnt. And this shows, and when it ends, Srinivasan says, the brain is preserved and the research is complete. The Einstein's secret is decoded, but he concludes by saying, he says, I'm going to be silent. I have completed my research, but let it end. So this is what the question that comes to you is whether the potential of a world-class, genuine scientists should be preserved by radical medical techniques at the expense of a great human sacrifice against the wishes of the human being himself. And if it is done, whose goals are achieved? I conclude on this note, and this is exactly what science fiction teaches you, because knowledge is a diksha. You are purified with this knowledge, and that is what which is embedded in our Vedas. Andakarana Shuddhartham Jnana Mulpasya Sepam Sa. Jnana Mulpasya Sepam Sa. Karanam. That is the purification process of knowledge. And that is what which science fiction also tells you. There is a purity, nothing would remain perfect, in perfect condition. Nothing would be, everything is exposed to change. And as we step onto this era of pandemic, we need to accept change. We have to be patient. And one thing that it points out is economics is not something that nature has ever focused on. Economics. That is the message that I have learned, and I'm sharing it with you. On that, I close my note on. Thank you so much for your patient listening. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much. Ma'am, we have a lot of questions. Shall we take the questions now? Ma'am?
Can you, Subusa, can you read out the questions so that I can?
Yes.
I can see the chat box. Rukia Begums, yes, there is a lot of research that is going on. Is there time? Otherwise, we would conclude. You can send those questions to my mail so that I can answer. There is a lot of writing, though, Rukia Begum, yes. It is also classified under minor literatures. There is a genre, I hope you are aware of that. There are plenty. That is why I said science fiction writers. There is no shortage for science fiction writers. There is, that is why I started with Bengal. There is no dearth for science fiction writers in Bengal, Marathi, then of course Malayalam also has Radhakrishnan. There is from Tamil writers. We had a conference. There were so many writers who had aspiring writers as well as established writers. There are some of them from Tamil Nadu who had visited State Kansas University at some point of time. So I think there are many writers. And if you want the list, it will take some time, but I will list out those names for you. Yes.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Now we have a lot of questions. Shall I read out a few questions, madam?
What is the scope of research? What is the scope?
I'll read out the questions.
Yes.
The first question is from Agana Bhattacharya. Ma'am, how can we look at the future? Bhattacharya.
Atanu Bhattacharya?
It's the participant.
Oh, he's a close friend of mine.
Okay. She raised this question. Ma'am, how can we look at the futuristic science fiction movies like The Matrix, for example?
How can we look at?
The futuristic science fiction movies. How can we look at the futuristic science fiction movies?
That is what I said. Science fiction is not only prophetic, but futuristic. That is what I was conveying to you by showing you the illustrations of Robideau. Matrix and most of the science fiction movies. I think you might remember me discussing about even in Matrix, I can see that there are so many layers of text emerging. It is not only about the the hierarchy of power. You know, there is the portrayal of the powerful, the submissive, and the dominant. Multiple ways in which you can look at Matrix as a science fiction movie. And I told you that I do not want, I mean, that is what I said, you know, science fiction, there is no death. I told you also about, I didn't bring up that movie, The Snowpiercer, which is a latest movie, which is directed by a Korean, I don't remember his name, Snowpiercer. You can watch. There are different ways in which science fiction movies are emerging. And some of them, that is why I said, there are the term that I introduced, that is pataphysics. Some of the movies do not, you know, offer you a palpable solution, but they assume that this can be a solution. So I think that term, the concept of pataphysics can be made relevant. I think so. You can apply that into the framework of, I think, this particular movie, which he has, I think, raised a question about. Are you satisfied with my answer? Any movie that discusses change, any movie that discusses change can be included under this broad genre of science fiction.
Ma'am, next
Thank
question.
you, ma'am. Thank you.
This is from Tamimul Ansari from Dubai, I think so. Is science fiction an inherently a political genre as it tries to present an alternate history which deals with how things should be? Is science fiction an inherently a political genre?
Oh, definitely. It not only politicizes, it not only problematizes. That is a key word that you need to hold on. It problematizes. So just imagine language. Can you say language is apolitical? Language is political. So science fiction, when it problematizes, it is definitely political. It cannot remain apolitical. That is what I think.
This Ansari further, he is from Saudi Arabia, and he asked us, also it is an attempt to take us away from the world of reality into the world of fantasy, in an attempt to blindfold us before the stark realities to get a kind of temporary relief.
That is why, sir, I should tell you, it takes you, you know, like, what does literature do? Literature makes you light and richer. There are many probable impossibilities that are discussed in literature. That is one of the dominant characteristics that is ingrained in any of those literature or any of those artistic, you know, like look at art, for example. It takes you away from reality. But let me ask you the question, what is reality for us? How will you define reality? The reality that you find in fiction, what is truth? What is the reality of truth? There is no such thing as truth. That is why historical metafiction or historiographic metafiction questions truth. It is a constructed truth. So reality is, if reality can be defined as a modified reality, science fiction handles with reality. So when it takes you away from the harsh realities, it also makes you, sensitizes you about the harsh realities that is around you.
Ma'am, two more questions, but a lot of questions are there. We'll take two more questions because we are in want of time. Why does science fiction as a genre only flourished in the world? Only flourished in the Western world? This is a question from Ramya Muthumohan.
I don't, these are the things, there was this kind of, that is what I was, there are multiple factors. But I should tell you, in spite of all this, see, there is a wrong or a misconcept about defining science fiction. That was what I was imploring you to. Science fiction does not mean that it can, of course, discuss science. It is not something that should be discussing only science. It is it should, if that particular story discusses about silences that are endured, marginalizations, injustices that are perpetrated, it is science fiction. And that is why I brought to your attention Handmaid's Tale by Margaret Atwood. I can also mention there are stories, these stories, I don't know whether they are available. This is one of those collection of stories by Kish Johnson. Kish Johnson, who is managing the center, and this is by Elizabeth Hull. There is nothing scientific or technical writing about in this. It's a beautiful, humane stories collection, because the Bitey Cat, that is one of the titles. And then there is James Gunn discussing about old folk. There is a beautiful story called Old Folk. There is nothing about technology that is there. So science is how you look at the term, how you decipher the meaning of that word science. Science means knowledge.
Thank you. Ma'am, this is the last question from
Yes.
Chakravarti Raju. Could you please connect post-apocalyptic fiction and science fiction, like Kevin Costner's Waterworld and The Fly of David Cronenberg?
I think that was what I was speaking about. That is why today I knew these questions would come. So that is why I introduced, when you look at Kevin Costner's movie, or when you look at, any of those fantastic movies, what is that, as the professor or the scholar, or maybe the honored participant was pointing out from Saudi Arabia, there is a lot of improbable situations that are, but they do not remain improbable. You do not know what is going to be your takeaway. There is a kind of a surrealistic representations that are a part of these movies. But when you look into the multiple layers of meaning, when you deduce those or cut the frills, there is a lot of profound meaning that comes to you. And that meaning is which makes it alluring or mesmerizing for us as viewers, or as we watch. There is something that, for example, any situation, there is you think that it will never happen. I would also mention this theoretical aspect of simulacrum and simulacra. Baudelaire, who gave us that word. Simulated reality, simulacrum and simulacra. You can apply that. And what did he say? Baudelaire became very controversial when he said the Gulf War did not take place. There is, so.
You want to go through the chat?
Are you happy?
It's okay.
Yes.
Last question she is asking,
Yes,
she's requesting, Susan Rice requesting.
Pardon
Science fiction writers are serving as shock absorbers on behalf of the corporate scientific projects in preparing common people face apocalyptic future and dystopic reality.
See, so now look at the way in which now you are putting together, connecting ideas. So that is exactly what I wanted you to do, there is a lot of possibilities, and my request is, there is so much of scope for you to, and there is, I think, infinite possibilities that surround. that is there in this particular area. Only thing is that it is considered as a marginal literature. It should not be, or minor literature. The term, very term, is what which is very painful. But it is a mainstream literature because it discusses about so closely about the existence of human being. You know, it is human existence that is being the central, or it is that which is problematized and questioned and politicized in SF.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much for accepting our invitation and delivering enlightening talk. And the audience would accept me and vouchsafe that you have justice to the invitation. And thank you so much, ma'am. And would you like to have some words to the elite participants now before you leave from the air?
Me?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, I think there is a very dedicated group of teachers, Jaypriya ma'am, and then the Subusa, and the other professors who facilitated this. I think these are the platforms that would actually make people enter into a zone where they feel enriched. You know, sometimes you might know about things that are being said, but listening and then being in a group where there is a lot of sharing of ideas, and that is which is now very much needed at the moment, because science fiction also makes you aware of the uncertainties of the world in which we live. And thank you, and keep yourself safe. I offer you my pranams as well as prayers. Armstrong, sir, looking forward to meeting you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, and take care, all of you. Keep yourself safe.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Ma'am, thank you so much. Thank you so much for a lovely session. And at the end of the day, you know, like on the 7th day, it was an awesome session, ma'am. And from Vedas to science fiction, you did a great job, and we'll keep in touch with you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Where is Mark, sir? I cannot see him here. Ma'am, I'll come back to you. Yeah, thank you. I'll come back to you.
No issues. No issues.
Thank you.